in the morning and you make the mistake of turning on the television just maybe to see what the weather is like, and you see that there are another 20 people who have been shot dead, another 40 wounded. The person who killed those 20 people is dead. The night before, a young singer, Christina Grimmie, was singing, and at the end of her show, while she was signing autographs and having selfies with her fans, somebody came in and shot her dead, and we wonder at justice, don't we? We wonder at justice in this world. And interestingly enough, maybe it's no surprise to those of you who are regular readers of Scripture, and I hope you all are. There will be a test after. The story that we have today of Ahab and Jezebel and Naboth in the vineyard is a story of justice, and it's an appropriate. It just seems pretty timely, and especially when you listen to the Gospel of Paul, when Paul is saying these words that justification doesn't come through actions of the law, but justification comes through faith and your relationship with God. It's just mind-boggling that we have this world that we deal with, and it's a function of the world that when we listen to the Scripture that we have listened to today, that the world was just maybe like this 2,000 years ago, or in the instance of Ahab and Jezebel and Naboth 2,500 or 2,600 years ago. Ahab, just for those of you who are Bible study people, Ahab got a bad rep just because he did. The history of the Old Testament or the Hebrew Testament is filled and replete with stories of how women messed men up, and Jezebel's another place where women mess men up. I ain't going there. I know better. But Ahab was one of the longer-serving rulers in Israel, and so therefore, as a marker of his relationship with God, oftentimes longevity of rule was an indication of his favor, quote-unquote, with God. And Ahab, or the kingdom of Israel, under the leadership of Ahab, actually was quite a wealthy place, a strong place. So Ahab has that story about it. But this is actually then, it's not so much about the historical references as it is about the theology, it is about the philosophy of the persons who are writing the Scripture. And I asked myself, when I read all of this, I asked myself, how does Naboth find justice? Naboth is killed. How does Naboth find justice in the world? And he was killed. Why didn't he just give this vineyard to Ahab? I mean, it seemed pretty fair, right? The vineyard's next to the king's palace, and it's convenient for the king, and the king's saying, hey, I'll give you a better vineyard, and if that's not good enough, I'll give you some money for this thing. Let's reach a deal. Let's make a deal. And Naboth says, I can't do that. And he says, and do you know why he can't do that? Do any of you, in this little bit of scripture that we have in his reply, do you get why he can't do that? The vineyard belongs to his ancestors. It is an ancestral place. And one of the great scriptural truths is that, and it functions throughout all of the ancient texts, is that the land that belongs to the people must be given to appropriately to the son that follows, or to the person that keeps it in the family, And he would be violating the basis of many of the laws of the Old Testament if he just traded it off for money. So Jezebel rigged the jury and brought two, because two were the minimum needed, so she kept the law. They were rogues, but the law says if you're denounced by two, then you're guilty, or at least it looks like you're guilty. And they dragged him out and stoned him. So how then does his family, how Naboth or his family recover justice? How does that happen? Naboth is dead. Naboth is dead. How do these 20 people find justice? How do their families find justice for this? How does that brother of Christina and Grimmy, who tackled the shooter, who then killed himself, how does he find justice for what happened? How do you find justice for the things that have wounded you in your life? How do you find justice? And what is that? What is justice? In the eyes of the Old Testament, it used to be an eye for an eye or a tooth for a tooth. And that was an advancement, remember? Because people would not, if somebody sinned against somebody else, they could pretty much do what they wanted to do, and revenge was built into it. So we get the eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, and that was revolutionary, because it meant that you couldn't do more to a person than had been done to you. Yeah, the family of Naboth, how do they get that eye or that tooth? And then you have the wonderful prophet who says that, well, if we keep going with the eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, we'll all be blind and toothless. And so we come into the gospel writer Paul, the older of the historians and the older of the theologians that we encounter in the New Testament, and he says, you're not going to get justice by law. You're not going to get justice by law. Let's examine how that works. Say, for instance, and I'm not picking on Texas because I was born in Texas, and they kicked me right out after that. 9 months later, I was in Hawaii, and Hawaii has paid the price too, so there you go. But if you are in Texas and you commit a capital crime and you are executed for that, there people say, okay, there's justice. We've taken a life because a life has been taken. And that's the legal definition there, and that's how they understand it, and that's, I don't know how that works. Because whatever happened, whatever was taken away, whatever was broken, whatever sin was committed, whatever that state of being was prior to the moment of the sin, prior to the busting of that cap on Christina and Grimmy, prior to that moment, she was leading a life, and that life had a whole continuum about it. And until that point, that life was moving in its trajectory. At that point where those 4 shots were put into her, at that point, the world ended for her. She died. And the changes were forever for the persons who were looking for justice. And so if this person, he shot himself, so okay, so now we can't drag him into the courts and make things right. The courts don't make things right, and I think that's what Paul's trying to tell us. The courts don't make things right. That there is a sense of justice within the court system, and we rely on that because the courts are larger than we are. They are a layer above us, and they are meant in their best form, in their ideal form. They are meant to be places where we can find a justice, or the best that society can provide for us in those terms. That woman who went into that room with Jesus lying on that couch and reaching in and having his meal with the Pharisee and everything, so his feet are behind him, and she comes behind him, because that's the way it is. He's laying on a couch and she comes behind him, and she is weeping, and she bathes his feet with tears, and she wipes his feet with her hair. She renders herself, she is already considered unclean because she is an acknowledged and known sinner. She renders him unclean, but she continues that process of rendering unclean. But what is she doing? What is she trying to do? She's trying to say to Jesus, that I understand that my sins cannot be made whole. That in terms of justice, what I have done in this world cannot be undone. So I am seeking something better. I'm seeking something better. And she weeps and prays over Jesus. And Jesus turns to her and says, because you are seeking something better, the process has begun. And I want you to understand that God is with you. God is with you. The process has begun. You have acknowledged your sin. You have turned from your wickedness. And you are forgiven. There are times when I get up in the morning and I turn on the radio and I wonder, how on earth can we find justice? And I realize that we cannot. And then especially today when I come and look at you, wonderful human beings who bring to this place your faith and who bind your faith together with my faith and with each other's faith, I look into your faces and I realize that when we get up in the morning and we cannot find justice, it's for us to turn to our faith in Jesus Christ and pray that God will bring justice to this world. And pray that God will do that. And I want you all to understand that I believe that God can and God will. I just won't be able to see it today, maybe. But I know I'll be able to see it. And I invite you to look into that for yourself.